I'm Chang. I am currently the executive director for HR analytics at Comcast. I've implemented some version of a people analytics tool 3 times. I don't really believe in micromanaging. I've always tried to learn new things. Bureau of Labor Statistics, blogs, and posts about the economy. The first year after go live is usually pretty ugly.
Jay, welcome to the podcast. I'm so thrilled to have you on.
Thank you.
I know that we have spoken in the past and you've shared your thoughts with me previously on different themes and matters, and I think it will be wonderful to share your thoughts to a wider audience. So first things first, give our audiences a little bit of an introduction to yourself.
Sure. So I'm Chang. I am currently the executive director for HR analytics at Comcast. I've been with Comcast now going on a little over 15 years. And I've been doing primarily people analytics related work pretty much for about 2/3 of that time. Before, when I first joined Comcast, I was primarily in comp analytics. Before that, I worked for GlaxoSmithKline doing sales comp. And then I spent a bunch of time doing a bunch of different things, which quite honestly I forget. At this point, it's been so long ago. I mean, I've been fairly lucky in terms of career that I've had the time at Comcast and even the time at GSK was a fairly lengthy period that I was there. So very lucky in the stability of my career in certain respects.
Absolutely. Quite impressive, the longevity that you've had. It is not an easy task to achieve that longevity. What would you say has allowed you to do so?
Wow, that's a great question. More luck than anything else, quite honestly. There was a period where I started working, went into consulting, made a couple of really, really good connections that led me to the private sector. Um, and then I joined another small consulting firm, and there was a bit of flux in my career. So I'm used to having a little bit more instability than it would
Mm,
be implied based on my tenure at these companies. But the thing that I would say overall, I've had a lot of success with is finding good managers
mhm,
and people who were willing to let me not only do the job that I was hired for, but also do other things that allowed me to grow my scope or change my scope, um, or evolve my role in a way that allowed me to continue to work at the company while not getting bored and making the job more interesting. So
mm.
it's a combination really of luck and just being flexible.
Well, luck, I suppose, in many ways, is that opportunity meets preparation. So it's very modest of you to say so, but I'm sure that there has been a lot of work from your side for that luck to appear. Um, it's interesting that you point to managers because I think you're a leader yourself, but they play a huge role in terms of career trajectory for other people in the team. You've mentioned that sense of autonomy and encouragement for growth. What else do you think makes a leader a good one?
So we were talking about this coincidentally the other day, kind of indirectly at work. And what we kind of talked about is in some respects, a good leader is a blessing and a curse.
Mm,
Because if you have a good leader, they set good goals. The goals are achievable, and typically there's stretch goals as well as easy run type goals. But overall, having a good leader means that you are feeling a sense of progress in both your career as well as in your day-to-day life. Um, but then there are leaders that you know who are not good, and they're around you with their own people.
mm,
And the work that you are doing for your good leader is not necessarily drawing the same kind of reward as similar levels of work that you would get for a bad leader, right? And that could be that the bad leader is just not recognizing you at all, and yet you're doing equivalent work, or you're doing equivalent work, but you are the bad leader because of the fact that they don't recognize that this is, relatively equal in terms of looking across the organization at people at your level. They will over reward, right? So you and I are both doing the same type of work, we're producing similar output, but because your leader doesn't feel that, or because my leader doesn't feel that what I'm doing is really above and beyond, while your leader does,
Mm.
you can be rewarded in different proportion to how I would be rewarded, right? And so that gets kind of, in certain respects, demoralizing if it's done widely. And the there's aspects of like the Peter principle that kind of come into this, where you have leaders that get to their level of incompetence. And before, I used to think that that was always kind of like sarcastic,
Mm.
but it's actually not. It's actually just saying that you do a good job and you get promoted. You do a good job and you get promoted, and then you reach a level where either you can't do a good job because the job is just above where your skill set or capability is, but you've been promoted into that job because of the work you've done before. And so the Peter principle is really actually um, a very good observation of the fact that as mutual funds and stock analysts say, past performance is not indicative of future results, right? You get promoted based on your past activity, but just because you've been promoted doesn't mean you're going to succeed at every level to which you've been promoted. I don't know if
So
that made
how
sense.
it makes sense. That's fascinating. See, this is why I wanted you to come onto the podcast. So how do you know at that point that you are ready? If the work that you've done previously doesn't equate to you being ready, what makes someone ready?
To a certain extent, that is where your innate capability and self-awareness come into play. And in my view, um, I am very self-aware of my strengths and weaknesses, but not everybody is, right? And so if you are promoted and you are not self-aware, you just think, oh, I've been promoted, I'm great, right? And
Mm.
so you keep doing what you're doing. And because you get higher and higher and higher up the organization, what you're doing is kind of allowed, right? Like you're not necessarily going to go up to a VP or an SVP and say, "Oh no, you're totally wrong. Why are you even thinking about this
Mm.
that way?" So instead, the VP says, "Oh, let's do this," and your staff may think, "Oh, that's not a good idea," but they're
Yeah.
not going to come out and say that's not a good idea. They have to find ways to kind of approach you and take you along and find a way to make your bad idea seem better, right? And good staff, that's managing up, right? That's basically what managing up is taking your expectations of what the ask is and trying to convert it into his or her expectations of what the ask is, so that you can actually deliver on something that they're asking for without it being impossible. So the really the part of leadership that is important, if you are self-aware, is that you recognize this, right? You know that you're not perfect. You know you don't necessarily know anything. And so you do rely on your staff and you allow them to tell you, hey, that's not a good idea. Or what if we did it this way? And you're not thinking, oh, I know best because I'm the boss, right?
Yeah.
So the self-awareness part, I think, is key. It makes managing up a lot easier because then it becomes a dialogue between you and me and you as my leader to say, hey, I understand your goal. Can we get to it this way versus the way that you suggested? Whereas if you're not self-aware and you say, I want to get here, I have to figure out a way to get there while making it possible to get there, even though I may not think it's possible.
That's fascinating. And it just really highlights the point that gets hammered quite a lot by the likes of Simon Sinek, for example, that the best performers don't necessarily make the best leaders. So it's very
Yes.
hard when you follow that model of promoting the one that's the best worker or the one that's performing the best, because they might not have those characteristics that will allow them to do so. That self-awareness, it's interesting because I think sometimes the best performers or the best workers are probably how do I pick the right words? might not have that self-awareness because what they actually have is the thing that makes them perform really well. And I think there's a bit of reading between the lines here so that I don't offend anyone. How do you think someone can cultivate that self-awareness rather than just relying on that feedback? How do you cultivate it, you think?
That, in my opinion, self-awareness is either something you have very early on in your work life and also in your personal life, or you may develop it much later on. And how you develop that is either you fail a lot and you figure out why am I failing, or you just give up, right? Like let's assume you don't just give up and you say, okay, I'm going to turn to just being a homeless person because I fail at everything. But if you fail enough, you try and figure out why you're failing. So that's one way to develop self-awareness. Not a great way, but a way to develop it.
Mm,
Um, the other way you can develop it over time is if you are competing for a role and you are not getting it on a consistent basis, that too is a form of failure. And if you're looking at people around you and why they're getting promoted or moving while you're not, the hard question to ask yourself is it a me thing or is it a they thing? And it's much easier to say it's a they thing because then it's not you. But for people who want to develop self-awareness, you really need to take a step back and say, maybe it is a me thing.
mm,
And what can I do? What did I do that is different? Is it the way that I'm interacting with my peers? Is it my skill set? Is it the way that my boss and I interact versus the way that they interact with their bosses? How do I adjust myself to better reflect what I see happening in people who are getting promoted? Very hard thing for people to take on because you're basically challenging, am I a good person? Whether
yeah,
that's employee or father or husband or whatever,
yeah,
you're asking yourself that question, and not a lot of people want to answer that question honestly to themselves.
yeah. It's very delicate because I think also what you're talking about is accountability in many ways, but
Yes,
if you're in the wrong environment and the feedback loop is giving you evidence that maybe isn't accurate, and actually you would be much better suited in another environment, then what that can do if you have a vulnerability, if you take that feedback on and it's not accurate and it might not be totally you, that can develop into something else entirely and actually
yes,
destabilize you and take you away from your capabilities too. It's a
yeah,
delicate balance to strike. But you are so right. And I imagine in different departments it looks different because of the personalities that it attracts.
yes.
Um, the reason I love these conversations and why I have enjoyed conversations with you is for our audience. I have a few questions that I said in advance, and we have
Mhm.
gone completely off
I'm
the
sorry.
question. No, I'm sorry. No, I just love it because that's when you know that a conversation is going to be a great one because there are so many different avenues it could go down. Um, I suppose going back a little bit into your own career, because we spoke about that briefly in your introduction, how have you ensured that you've continued to grow professionally? I know you said that managers have helped, but in terms of that accountability piece, what have you done that others could learn from?
um, the one thing that I tell folks when they ask similar types of questions is I've always tried to learn new things,
Yeah.
right? I've never thought, oh, I'm the expert in this area and I never want to be anything else, right? And that's both a function of me wanting to just poke around and be nosy about things, and also a function of the fact that my job has evolved over time, especially
Yeah.
at Comcast. And so I've either had to evolve with it or I've had to, I would have been basically left behind. Um, so if I look honestly at my career at Comcast, if I boil down the all the stuff that I did over the past 15 years, it basically works out to I implemented the same thing 3 times, right? So it's if I'm being completely barefaced, honest, and plain about what I did, it's basically I've implemented some version of a people analytics tool 3 times, and as a result, I've become exceedingly good at it.
Yeah.
Right, like it's that line from The Matrix where they're talking about destroying the human city. They've become exceedingly good at destroying this thing. I've become exceedingly good at implementing this type of system. And that is a result of not only the system changing each time, but also of me gaining experience about what failed each time before, as well as me just learning more about how databases work, how software technology works, how things connect to each other from a technology stack perspective. Even the AI stuff, I'm a lot of what is happening in the AI space. I'm trying to pick up and learn through YouTube and LinkedIn courses and Udemy and those kinds of things because I'm constantly interested by bright shiny things, right? And so I see something bright and shiny. I'm like, ooh, I need to see that. And then I try to figure out what is this thing? How do I understand it? And then does it have any applicability to what I'm doing here? Um, and then the other thing that I think is kind of lacking in a lot of the folks that I see that are younger is the ability to connect. I call it synthesis, but basically it's the ability to take information from a lot of disparate sources and connect them in some coherent form, right? So, I follow all kinds of weird things. I follow stuff from like Bureau of Labor Statistics blogs and posts about the economy to posts about competitors and their fiber buildup or whatever. Like and sprinkled in there is like just a bunch of weird YouTube videos. So all of that is to say that taking all of this information in and just letting it kind of sit in your
Yeah.
head and gel, and then suddenly being asked a question and you're like, oh, well, this, and this is how they all kind of change together, right? It's sounds so simple, but it's very hard for people to really do that. Especially when you have the day-to-day life. It's hard to do kids and dinner and the soccer games and all the things that modern parents and families are expected to do nowadays, and then also sit there and read, right? Reddit or
Yeah.
blogs or newspapers or whatever. And I at least have a little bit of a luxury in the sense that my kids are grown and it's just me, my wife, and our dog. So I have more time to do that kind of thing. But even when I was younger in my career, I still had that fascination about, oh, well, that's an interesting point. How do I use that? Or I just let it sit there in the back of my head. Oh, or this is connected to this, right? that kind of that kind of thinking, I honestly don't know if it's trainable because I have been asked in the past, how do we create another J? And I don't have a good answer for that because so much of what is J is just the accumulation of all of these little points of information that I'm just kind of keeping back there in the back of my head. And then all of a sudden it becomes a coherent thought that impresses somebody, right? Like that's literally
Yeah.
what happens sometimes.
Taking it back a little bit into the work environment, obviously you are managing teams. You're clearly very self-aware and emotionally intelligent. So I imagine, now this is just an assumption, but I imagine working with you, you would be able to pick up on the different personalities and different dynamics. How would you say you create or try to create the best corporate dynamic that you can to maintain some harmony in the team?
Um, I I am not, I would not say that I'm necessarily the best leader in general, right? From a
Okay.
manager perspective. What I am good at is managing certain types of people. And by that I mean people who are creative, hardworking, and willing to learn.
Hmm.
Those types of people I give lots of rope to, right?
Yeah.
Like I will give them as much rope as they think they need. I am happy to step back and not micromanage. I am technical enough that I can challenge them on most things that they are doing, but not so technical that I'm like, okay, here's to sit aside and I'll do it. This is what I mean, right? Like I'm not that level. um, which makes for a good environment if they are willing to accept that level of challenge.
Yeah.
So it's because it's two-way street. I'm going to be like, okay, well, I know you can do this, this, and this in the tool. So can we do something with that? And if they're of the type that, well, he doesn't know the tool, he hasn't used the tool, it's been years since he touched it. Why is he telling me what is or is not possible?
Yeah.
Right? If that's their attitude, we're not going to get along. But
Yeah.
if they are willing to say, oh, yeah, yeah, I know that's possible, and here's why that won't work in this situation, but I know where you're trying to get to now, and I can get to it differently,
Yeah.
right? So, and then in that case, I'm like, yeah, okay, go for it. As long as I get to where I want to go, I don't care if the path is really circuitous or not. Um, so, in those types of cases, we get along very well,
Mm.
right? Because I don't really believe in micromanaging, and I'm very bad at
Mm.
it, quite frankly. I'm just really bad at micromanaging. And so the flip side of that, though, is if I give you that rope, you need to actually do something with the rope, right? And
Yeah.
and if you don't do something, then I start feeling like I'm being cheated because I'm trusting you to do this thing and you're not doing this thing, yet you're taking advantage of the fact that I've trusted you to do this thing.
Yeah.
So it really is, that's where the accountability piece comes in, right? And so if they want to work well with me, they will be self-accountable because I'm trusting them to be self-accountable. And if they're
Mm.
not self-accountable, then I have to be the one enforcing accountability. And I don't like that. I really don't.
Yeah. Because the burden actually goes on to you when it shouldn't be. And I find
Yes,
that there's transference of burden. It's almost like a transference of consciousness, um, to kind of micromanage someone and ensure that they are on track when actually that's their responsibility. That's probably what they're paid for. What
right.
would you say makes a team tick then? Because everyone's going to be very different. So what would make it
Yes.
tick?
I'm thinking about our team actually, because our team is very small, but we have a couple of people who are very outgoing, very social, very much they're the kind of people that like being together in parties and are very social types of people.
Yeah.
And then you have the rest of us who are very much introverts and perfectly willing to sit quietly at a dinner together, eating and not really talking much. And we all get along because we all recognize each other's strengths and weaknesses. And we all have a really good sense of the fact that we're each doing work, right? Like we're not shirking. We don't, each person has a very good role. They're very good in that role. And the roles, whether deliberately set up or not, are all very complementary to each other.
Yeah.
And so that makes it very easy for us to see, oh yeah, we understand how all of us interact. We get along very well with each other. There's a lot of joking and informality, which could be bad because we have new people come in and they're not necessarily used to this level of informality and challenging back and forth and that kind of thing. And they can read it as, oh my God, this is such a crazy place. They're like yelling at each other, or they're just like they're really like butting heads, and we're not really. We're just really
Yeah.
like very passionate about our work. And because we've been together for a while, we are very comfortable with each other. And
Mm.
so once, because we had a couple of new analysts join us over the past couple of years, and initially they were very hesitant, right? They were very shy, they were very reserved, they were not used to this environment. And then they meet me, and I'm just kind of like really unhinged in certain respects. Um, and and so they start realizing, oh, it's okay. And then they start relaxing and they start participating and they understand how the dynamic works. But that's a very welcoming space, right? And
Yeah.
so we are very welcoming with each other in that sense because we have a level of mutual trust and respect. And getting to that is hard, right? Like
Mm.
an environment thing, that's a leader thing, that's a personality thing, and not every team can get there.
That is, how do you detect from interviews if that person's going to fit in? Because that seems very
Um,
tight knit.
yeah, no, we get lucky. It's so hard. It's
Really?
so hard because we're not hired. Like when we interviewed the two analysts that we had join our team within the last few years, we didn't look for that. Like we weren't saying, oh no, they have to fit in. Like we were looking for skills. We wanted specific skills. And so of the people that we interviewed, these were the people that had the what we felt were the best set of those skills, and we liked them as people. Like, but it's not like I recognize that my analyst immediately off the bat. I was like, oh yeah, she's perfect. She and I will just mesh. No, I didn't really get that sense from her. It's so it is a bit of luck that falls into it. But I like to feel that it's also, even if you aren't necessarily part that way at the beginning when you join the group, my hope is that you see enough of the group's interactions that you start becoming that way more,
Yeah.
because it is a sense of safety. And we talked about it from earlier on in terms of how you and your boss interact and how that works from a self-awareness perspective. But
Mm.
being self-aware and having that also implies that you're in an environment where being self-aware is rewarded, right? Because if you are self-aware and you say, oh yeah, right, I'm not good at that and I really should not be doing that work, but I can do this work. If you say
Mm.
that, some bosses will see that as, well, you're not the person I want then, right? Like I want someone who can do this. Or they may take your self-awareness and use that as, oh well, this is why your shortfalls, this is all your shortfalls, right? So you need a level of trust, you need a level of an environmental trust. And I
Mm.
think for our team, we all are very much open to each other and willing to embrace that level of vulnerability if you're willing to offer it. If you don't want to offer it, that's fine too. It just feels bad to me that sometimes if people aren't willing to, or aren't willing or aren't comfortable opening themselves up in that way, I feel like they're kind of missing out on the dynamic of the team, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that we're trying to keep them out, it's just that because everybody else is that way, we all kind of tend to gravitate towards each other. And so if you're standing out here by yourself and you're not really opening up or trying to join in, it's hard for us to include you, right?
Yeah.
Because we're also willing to be respect privacy and say, okay, they don't want to be that way. We're fine with that, right?
Yeah.
We will treat you the way you want to be treated, and we will leave you alone if you want to be left alone. We will pull you in if you want to be pulled in. We're very good about that. But again, that's less about me and more about the fact that I happen to work with these people who are willing to do that.
Yeah. And that's sort of like what Brené Brown talks about in terms of vulnerability and connection, isn't it? So
Yeah,
that is one of the best ways. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's not professional. You don't have to kind of tell everyone about your life
right.
necessarily, even just to admit, I did that wrong, or I don't know how to do this, as you said, is enough in a professional
Yes.
environment to get you close, which is brilliant to hear. Now, a little bit about Workday. I guess we do have to talk about that. You went through a Workday implementation at Comcast and went live in 2021. What were some of the things, firstly, that went to plan that you're happy about or proud of?
Um, Overall, the goal when we went to Workday was two things. One being we wanted to rethink all of our processes, right? We wanted to try and redo all of the processes to make things more rational versus what we had in our old environment. So, in that sense, I think we did the best job we could knowing what we knew about Workday.
Mhm.
So, that was one. The second thing was really forcing people to decide what is and is not important, because Workday is Workday, right? Like they're not going to necessarily customize it right away to do exactly what you want versus what I want as a company. They'll get there eventually if they think it's important enough, but they're not necessarily going to modify the entire ship based on your requirements for go live. So in
Mhm.
that sense, it forced us to really kind of constrain ourselves to fit a certain box. And that challenged us from the perspective of um, really kind of deciding, okay, how are we going to do this within that box and yet preserve most of what we need? So
Mm.
in that sense, that was really good. Yeah, but overall, it was also challenging in the sense that we tried to be as out of the box, quote unquote, as possible. And that caused a lot of problems after go live,
Mm.
right? So that you can't be you can't be as out of the box as Workday would necessarily want you to believe, but you also can't be as customized as as a company would like to be.
Mm. And how did you overcome that, you would say?
Um, so I was dealing mostly with the reporting side and analytics side of things. And in Workday, you basically have processes and reports, right?
Yeah.
And you look at your processes through reports. So
Yeah.
everything in Workday comes out as a report. And so when
Yeah.
we went live, you were basically cutting off people's ability to run reports that like they were used to. And while
Mm.
you do your best to try and figure out, okay, here are the reports that we think you'll need at go live, um, Workday has some things that they like to restrict that we honored, and that wound up causing us to really kind of be behind the ball when we went live. So, you know, they kept saying, hey, we have the reports, we have standard reports, we have all of these reports. So
Yeah.
use the reports that we have. And we said, okay, fine, we will do that. And then we went live and people were like, how do I connect the employee to data for this to the employee data for that? Where's the
Yeah.
employee ID? And we're like, we don't have that.
Yeah.
Because it was not revealed on Workday delivered reports. You know, they don't like to necessarily reveal employee ID. And so we now had to modify a ton of reports to add employee ID so that people can do lookups against other data, right?
Mm.
And then a lot of the Workday reports are predicated on being able to drill into the individual objects or processes or whatever. And that's fine on a one person type of thing. Like I can look at you and all of your transactions and understand exactly what happened. But doing that at scale
Yeah.
is really hard. And so you do wind up creating a lot more than you think data dump reports where it's just literally columns and columns and columns of data because you're trying to do something at scale. And for us, scale is very different than, you know, a small startup or even a mid-sized company, where 500 employees is considered, okay, they consider that large. And for us, that's like a work location, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very different approach. And I think at least for most of Workday's history, they were dealing a lot more with the 500 and 1,000 employee companies versus these 70, 80, 100,000 monoliths that are now starting to pick up their software. So it's a very
And
different thinking for them.
how long did it take to get all of that done, to overcome all of that?
So the implementation period, I want to say was like 2 years.
Okay.
We spent about 2 years doing the design and build. And then we were scrambling for like probably the first 9 months after go live to try and just catch up with all of the things that people were saying were missing or needed or that we had misinterpreted. So the first year after go live is usually pretty ugly.
Yeah. Pretty messy. Almost
Yeah,
like
yeah.
coming out of a pandemic of some sort, of a
Yes,
crisis,
exactly.
and having
And
to
to your point, we were going
recalibrate.
right through.
There you are.
We went remote right during the as we were starting to ramp up for go live for implementation, and so a lot of the implementation stuff happened remotely. So that was also another interesting
Yeah.
challenge.
Yeah, it would have been. Yeah, I imagine it's a bit like, in books they talk about pathetic fallacy, where the weather reflects the character. It's like the crisis is almost like the crisis of the implementation.
Right,
When we
exactly.
last spoke, and this is actually one of the things that made me want to invite you to the podcast because of the way we kind of went off on a tangent about it. You have already discussed how you have a curious mind and you go and seek out different knowledge from different sources. And then there are other types of people who are very highly specialized. We talked about this then, but I'd love to bring it onto the podcast now. And maybe make it more about hiring. So for candidates who are looking for new positions or looking to grow, maybe early on in their career, maybe even further down the line, what would you advise to be a master of none and jack of all trades, or highly specialized?
In today's world, I would say you need at least one specialty. You have to be
Yeah.
good at one thing, and that one thing is your entry into everything else. So if you are starting out your career, um, I strongly encourage, and I do this with my own son, um, I encourage you to focus on being good at something, whether that is Python coding, whether that is ML technology and techniques, whether that is, graphic design or visual design or data, tools like Tableau and Ultrix and the like. Be very good at one thing because that's your entry into not only your first job, but also your subsequent job.
Yeah.
And then once you get a little bit of experience and you start finding an environment where they will let you grow your skills, that's when you have to kind of start deciding, okay, do I keep building on this thing that I have and go deeper? And maybe I go deeper, but I also widen that hole a little bit so I know a bit more. But at the end of the day, I'm basically trying to drill down into becoming an expert in one thing
Mm.
versus, okay, I know this one thing and it's kind of related to this other thing over here that I'm also interested in. So is there a way I could jump to that and maybe not go so deep, but I would be interested in learning that? That's when you have to kind of decide how what you want to do. For
Yeah.
me, I got lucky again because I came of age in my career at a time when it was a bit more greenfield. And
Mm.
so while, being in consulting is kind of a luxury because you get to learn a lot of different things across a lot of different environments. And so you do kind of get that breadth of visibility that you wouldn't necessarily get
Okay.
if you were working for a company. Um, but by that same token, I never really developed, in my opinion, the deep expertise in an area, right?
Mm.
And so, I went from consulting to being a project manager to being a database person to compensation. None of those things are really related to each other,
Yeah.
but the world was such that I could do that kind of thing, and I knew enough and could learn enough that once I did that jump, I was successful in the sense that I could pick up most of what I needed very quickly.
Mm.
So and that's where self-awareness kind of comes in, because if you know that you are good at learning quickly and you can go across multiple domains,
Yeah.
then that almost kind of decides for you that you want to be a jack of all trades because your attention span is such that, oh, I like that. Oh, I like that. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
So you're looking for places where you have that opportunity, right?
Mm.
Whereas I'm a Python coder, I'll always be a Python coder. I'm going to be the best coder ever. Then okay, that also has certain things that you're going to basically direct yourself to, right?
Definitely. I'm curious. I'm going to put you on the spot, and I hope that's okay. What's one thing, one of the many things I imagine that you have discovered or gone into outside of your professional field that has actually helped you? So, for example, for me, it's when it comes to recruiting, and that's to do with human connection, so on and so forth. It's actually a lot of literature, and learning about people and empathy and understanding different characteristics. What would you say is the one unrelated thing that has allowed you to do what you do?
Um, Gosh, I sound so boring now.
No, why? I
Because
guarantee you
I,
don't,
I'm
especially
just
with the Cookie Monster.
I'm just thinking here. So I am not what I would consider a traditional. Um, Here's what I'll say: when people meet, they usually have like some kinds of things that they are commonalities where they can discuss. They
Yeah.
bring up something, and you're like, oh yeah, I totally get that, or I've talked about that, or I've read about that. I am very bad at sports. Like
Okay.
like I just have no interest, conception, desire to do anything with sports.
I love
And
that.
so to the point where my coworkers make fun of me, and we refer to various parts of whatever the object is that is in contention in a given sport. We find terms for. So like it used to be an oblong spheroid for football because it was, because of its shape. And then somebody mentioned the oblong spheroid of hockey, and I'm like, but that's a cylinder. And so now we had to come up with a cylindrical object of contention or something like that to come up with the fact that to make fun of the fact that I don't know sports.
Yeah.
And I say this because my way to relax is to go and learn about things that have absolutely no relation to anything in reality,
Yeah.
right? Like I was a huge Battlestar Galactica fan. And so I watch all these videos on here's the Battlestar Galactica, here's how it's put together, here's how the propulsion works, here's the way that like people live on this ship of this size, here's the whole history of the events
Amazing.
that led up to Battlestar Galactica. I watch all that stuff. Same with like Lord of the Rings and video games that I will never play because I'm so bad at video games, but I love reading the about the history, the mythology, the storyline that went into the video game. So much like you and literature, where you're reading about, people are writing about events and things that are either real or tangential to the real. I'm way out there, like reading about stuff that's never going to be real. But I find that stuff fascinating, and so um, I say all this to say that trying to find connection in that kind of interest is more about, oh, in this society, this is how they look at how humans interact with each other, or how
Yeah.
humans interact with aliens, or how humans interact with intelligences, right? And so it's sometimes I'm able to say, oh, well, okay, that kind of makes sense. And how do I see an analog for that in our current world, or how we interact with each other today, or in my team, or whatever? Are there things that I can kind of draw on as analogies to kind of throw out there as a way to explain what the heck I'm even talking about? So it's a very weird thing that I do.
It's not weird. It's not weird, and it's also not boring, first of all. And you know what it made me think about? The fact that you said that you go into teams and you don't necessarily do all the technical stuff, you stand back and you understand the concept of it, and then you think outside the box. And in those situations, you're watching things that are actually have aspects of reality, but are completely different to reality at the same time, and how you're coming to like think about how it's come to form. And that's what you're doing day to day. You're thinking about the strategy and how to bring aspects that we already know, the rules that we know, and how to break those rules and actually create a new reality in that wonderful world of Workday. So it does connect, you know. I know
Actually,
we have,
you said a word. You said a word that I didn't refer to, but I think is important in the context of the question you asked about wide or deep, because the word strategy means so much to so many people because we
yeah,
toss it around like it's confetti. But when you think about what that actually means, it's very hard to define what
yeah,
strategy is. And in the context of do I go deep or do I go wide, I personally feel that if you are doing strategy, you have to be wide,
yeah,
because the strategy, you have to be able to see the strategy, and then from the strategy you kind of have to figure out, okay, how do I get there? And that becomes tactics, and then
yeah,
from tactics it becomes logistics and operations, because all of those things lead up to getting you to where you want to go. And you typically want ideally you want one person who can look at all of those and say, oh yeah, that's good, that's bad, we should do it this way, but all of that keeping in mind the strategy. And for me, I personally feel that the broader you are, the better you are at that, especially if you can go broad but with little dimples where you're a little bit deeper in some areas than in others. I think that helps you really realize strategy better.
absolutely. It's more holistic.
Yeah.
Um, Amazing. I know we're coming to the end of the podcast. There is one question that I ask every guest at the end. I'd be curious to know what is one decision that you have made in your career that has had a defining impact?
Um, so this is going to be a weird one, but way back when I was in consulting, I was maybe 2 years into consulting. I was new to the workforce, and I was talking with another consultant who was a manager, and she was telling me about this product called SAP. And she was telling me, you got to get into SAP. You got to do it. It's going to be such a future. And if you're interested, we'll pay for all the training. We'll get you certified. We'll do all this stuff, and you can go. And all I thought at the time, because I was an arrogant idiot, was it's a mainframe technology. Why would I want to go into mainframes? And at the time, I was working with a client who was doing imaging, and so I was just like, ooh, imaging is going to be the future. We got to digitize all this stuff. Well, you flash forward even just like 10 years from that point, and Y2K comes around, and SAP consultants are charging like literally $500 a minute to breathe in your general area. And I'm just like, wow, that was a really stupid decision on my part, because at the time, imaging was basically dead, right? Like probably within 3 years after I made that choice, imaging had pretty much died. And so that was a very bad choice that I made, but I was able to recover from it. But man, my life would have been very different if I had gone down that SAP path.
That's interesting. But look at where it's led you regardless.
Yes, I've had a successful career. I really can't complain about anything I've done or experienced from a career perspective. But I do know that I would be in a very different place if I had gone down the SAP path. So
is there anything that makes you feel glad that you didn't?
That's kind of like when you marry girl X versus girl Y, right? Like
that is very true.
I mean, I like my career. I like where I am. I'm very content with what I've done and where I'm going, where I am and where I want to go. But by that same token, I don't know enough about what I had given up to get here. And the hard part of where I am is that if somebody comes to me for advice, I can't really tell them anything I did that got me here. And that's what I feel bad about, is that sometimes people will come to me for advice, and I'm just like, gosh, I really wish I had something to help you, or to kind of tell you what it is that that I did that you can replicate. And I feel bad that I can't do that because I just don't know.
Thank you so much, Jay. This has been so wonderful. I am so glad that you had the time to come onto the podcast, and I don't know where the time has gone. It has flown by. I feel like I could speak to you for hours on end. I appreciate you, and thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a pleasure.